Hi, you're watching TechCrunch TV. My name's Colleen Taylor. Welcome back to our roundtable discussion about Sheryl Sandberg's excellent new book, Lean In. We've got a star-studded group of leading women here from the tech industry. And so in this third segment, I want to talk about partners and mentors and the sort of human element here that Sheryl really spends a lot of time talking about in the book. She talks about how women have a bit more of a hard time maybe getting mentors, and it's not because they're not out there, but it's because they kind of ask in the wrong way, and it's just a very complicated mentorship situation. And I want to ask all of you, have you guys had mentors along the way? And maybe you could talk about who that is. Ashley, if you want to start.
I was going to ask Sheryl to be my mentor, but apparently that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. It's funny, I don't think I've had a mentor in the traditional sense. So I have a boss who's enormously supportive, a mentor slash manager. But then the type of mentor I've had have been more for the specific questions I've had. So sort of what Sheryl talks about, if don't ask someone just straight up to be your mentor, go to them with a specific question. So when I was building my team, I asked Margaret at Andreessen Horowitz if she would sit down with me and sort of talk about how to structure that, and she was immensely helpful. Or Jane Hines, who runs communications for Salesforce and has been there since day one. So people who I felt could help in a very sort of specific way. And I've always been blown away by how receptive people have been to doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always had mentors as well, though none of them have ever been women. And I don't exactly know why, except that perhaps all of my bosses have been men, and some of them are former bosses, or just those are the people who've been able to be most helpful and applicable to my work. But I have to say, I've never said the words to somebody, "Will you be my mentor?" And I don't think I could.
Yeah, it's awkward.
It's a very awkward phrase. And in fact, I think if you actually said to any of these men, Megan considers you a mentor, they wouldn't be shocked, but they might be a little bit like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. And so I'm not going to name names here. But they are people who I make a point, and I'm actually someone who's religious about my calendar, of meeting with on a regular basis. One in particular from the product world who's very senior at Google. Basically, in many ways, got me through my time at Square, leading up product there with advice and guidance, not on the specific products, not even on how to build out my team, but just on how to think about growing with the organization and growing with the product user base. And that was because we put time in calendar to meet every other week, every single time, and we never failed to show. And so I think it's more about finding those people who have the experiences that you want to have, and then just being religious about making sure that you check in with them.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about mentors in my life, and they've made a big difference to me in making that transition from being an engineer into an entrepreneur. One of the folks that I always mention is Scott Griffith, who's the CEO over at Zipcar. And he kind of took me under his wing from the beginning and even gave me free space to work out of the Zipcar office. But I think, the point that really struck me in the book was that instead of going out and looking for mentors, build relationships, ask great questions, be strategic. And if you do those things, then people will want to help you, guide you, and they'll seek you out. And when I look back at my relationship with Scott, it all started with a 30-minute, coffee chat about how I was thinking about TaskRabbit, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I think that was a really important point. It's not like she says a mentor is going to come in and be your Prince Charming and, swoop you off into the CEO sunset. And I loved that analogy. So I think that's the most important thing.
And I also do think that you grow out of mentors, right? You need mentors for different stages of your career and, candidly, your life. And so it's not necessarily a relationship that's for the long term, but it's how can you have a relationship that will help you understand and excel in the portion of your career that you're at that time.
So my turn to share a rather embarrassing story. I was an engineer at Facebook in 2008 and overlapped with Sheryl. And I remember she held a gender issues in the workplace session, and soon after that I was faced with the dilemma of, do I stay and be an engineer at Facebook, or do I go to Stanford Business School where I got admission? And she gave me some great advice, and at the end of it I said, will you be my mentor?
You're the one?
I don't know, I think she gets many of them, but the point is, I'm glad she talks about this, because Since then, I went to Stanford Business School, I started a company, and I got genuine, true great people who took me under their wing because I was really curious and I wanted to learn and I asked lots of questions. But my background, I grew up in India, in a small town where women just knew how to learn how to cook, tend to a family, and get married at the age of 16 or 18. And so, if this book can influence other young women to say, well, seek mentors by learning about others and asking great questions and genuinely being curious, maybe I could have avoided asking her, will you be my mentor?
I loved that chapter about mentorship. And what I loved about it is that I'm really excited for my daughter to read that, because I wished I had read something like this when I was 16 years of age and thinking through my career and thinking about mentorship, because I feel like I've made the same mistake of confining myself to the notion of how a mentor should be and then trying to pigeonhole someone into that. And what I realized after reading this book is that I actually do have a lot of mentors, but just they're not in the traditional form. And including my husband, for example. I find him to be a mentor to me in so many different ways, and professionally, personally. And so I really liked the book in that it opened my eyes, and it also made me realize that this is going to make a big difference, I think, in other women's lives.
And this is a very young panel, and we did that on purpose. We wanted the younger generation, because we've heard a lot from the Maureen Dowds of the world about what they think about this book. And so we wanted to get this young group together, but I think that all of you are at these points in your careers where maybe you should be someone's mentor as well. And, reaching out, it's not just about someone coming up to you and asking, but going and talking to a younger male or female and, seeking them out too and talking to them. Even though we're all so busy, I can't even imagine.
Something you have to put time aside for. I mean, it's what's happened as I've moved from Google to Square to venture capital at Kleiner is different people with different interests have come out and said, I'm really interested. I have actually received emails, or will you be my mentor? It feels like a lot of responsibility, proposal in some sorts. And you can fill an entire calendar with coffee dates, right? Yeah. And so sort of the action item I gave myself, again, because I am a slave to my calendar, is, okay, I'm going to put aside an hour every week, and I'm going to fill those up with 15 to 20 minute slots, and I will meet with those people who email me out of the blue, or I'll do phone calls. Actually, a lot of them are phone calls, because there's a lot of folks east who want to come out to California and have those conversations. And I can't be an ongoing mentor for all of these folks, but making the time, especially since so many people made that time for me, is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, given how interconnected Silicon Valley is, it's also a selfish decision, right?
Right.
I mean, I love chatting with entrepreneurs who are really early and want to learn about PR. I'm always a little baffled when they ask me, because I'm like, oh, I'm still learning how to do this. But or talking at incubators, and there's like a whole new crop of people who may go on to do really cool things. And so I like that Cheryl sort of breaks down the really rigid definition of mentorship, because by no means would I want to like an hour with one person each week. She has that funny anecdote where she thinks she's mentoring this girl, and then the girl says, oh, like, I wish I had a mentor. And Cheryl's like, what do you think I've been doing? She's like, well, a mentor is someone who will talk with you for an hour each week. And Cheryl's like, no, honey, that's a therapist. So I'm not ready to be anyone's therapist, but I do think, there's a lot of reasons for, spending some time information sharing and meeting new people.
I thought another interesting part of the mentorship angle was sort of talking about her husband and how she, making your partner into a real partner. And I'm curious, what you guys think about that. And she said in the past, the biggest business decision you'll make is, who your partner is, who your husband, your wife, your long-term partner will be. So I'm curious what all of you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I'm successful with Piazza and the reason I can have a baby today and also be running a company is, in my case, not only just my husband, but also his parents and the extended family support I get. And I tell myself so many days that if I had not left that first marriage, I would not be anywhere near having understood my full potential.
I thought it was just, that was one part of the book that I thought, you know, of all things that are controversial, I think this is probably it. You know, she's very straightforward and saying, you know, to the point where it's almost, you know, dating advice. And she's saying, you know, you can mess around with the bad boys and go on a few dates and, you know, with the sensitive, you know, but toxic artist or something. But when it comes to who you settle down with, it should be, you know, a man or a woman who's stable and invest in you and stuff like that. And that was just, it was so frank, I thought, that she said that.
She actually said it was the #1 thing. And it is a little bit shocking because it almost seems anti-feminist, right? That you should have to like rely on a man in order to reach your full potential. And I love that whenever it's a question of going for pragmatism or saying something that's comfortable and politically correct, Cheryl picks the pragmatic argument, so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my case, that really resonated with me as well because my husband has also helped come up with the idea for TaskRabbit, right, and has been involved from the very beginning. And early on, he was the one that stayed at the stable full-time job so that I could go off and not take a salary and bootstrap a company. And years later, after we raised our A round, he came on full-time, and now we work together full-time at TaskRabbit. So there's no question that in my case with TaskRabbit, you know, having my husband Kevin be a partner, not only in the business, but also, you know, in our marriage has been a huge reason why we've been successful.
She also brings up an interesting statistic of, you know, the Fortune 500 CEOs, very small percentage of them are women. Obviously, it's like 28 women who are Fortune 500 CEOs, but 26 of them are married. You know, one's divorced and only one has never been married, which I personally hope that's something that changes. You know, I mean, because I'm sure we have Fortune 500 CEOs who are male. A lot of them have been divorced. A lot of them are unmarried. And so that was actually, that whole section was kind of disheartening to me. Because it's just kind of, or you would hope that there would be more diversity in that group.
Well, I think even more controversial is the point she makes about everything will be in balance when half of those Fortune 500 CEOs are women and half of the people that stay home with the kids are men.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's actually really a balance. And, you know, that is like the ending point that ends the book and starts the continuing conversation.
Right. Yeah, so speaking of continuing conversation, we've got more. So please stay tuned for the next segment.